Hi, everybody. This is Hondo Carpenter, your Las Vegas Raiders beat writer for Sports Illustrated and the host of the Las Vegas Raiders Insider podcast. Very excited for the second time to bring a man on that has started working for me the 1st of April. He graduated from Central Michigan University, and we hired him to help us and to be a great writer for us. And now he's covering the Raiders with us, Michael France. He was on last week with his tremendous research into looking at the NFL teams and over the last 10 drafts, how many first round picks have they had and how many were in the top 10. And what we learned from his research was that the best 11 teams in the NFL literally had zero or only one top 10 pick. And we begin to really dissect that. Now, that information came when an NFL executive suggested it. We gave it to Michael. He ran with it and did a tremendous job like an old veteran. And that's part of the reason that we hired him is that dogged work ethic. And I always tease him. I need him to be more like his parents and in other areas. And I'm not going to get into those, but I'm going to stay on him. I'm just busted him this morning. But Michael, good to have you back on the program with us. Thanks for joining us, buddy.
Thank you for having me, man. Happy to be here for the second time in front of Raider Nation.
Um, so last week when we got into the research, we looked at those top 11 teams. We spent a lot of time looking at the Raiders. Now today it's going to be a very Raider-centric program, which they all are, even sometimes macroly, sometimes microly. But when you look at what's coming, uh, I said this earlier in the week, talking to an NFL general manager who once said to me, you can't win games in April, May, June, July, but you can lose them. And that's very, very telling because the best teams in the NFL are good drafters. There isn't some teams that you're like, well, they're good in free agency, but they're not good drafters. The teams, I mean, even with Bill Belichick, who had misses, he was phenomenal in the later rounds. We're going to get more into that later in the program. But I want to get into something that Al Davis told Bill Parcells, and you wrote about it, and you did a tremendous job with that article. But it was a great piece of advice from Al Davis that I think is still important today when he told Bill Parcells, avoid the dog pound. Talk about your research, what you learned, and tell us about that, please, that philosophy of Al Davis.
Well, it's essentially the exact quote is, and I'm quoting the incredible 33rd team article I got it from. It was two Parcells. What he said is, if you don't have your philosophy in personnel, you don't have your prototypical values in place on personnel. Pretty soon, and these were their exact words, your team starts to look like a dog pound. One of these, one of those, big ones, little ones, ones that bite, ones that don't. You need to have your philosophy on personnel in place going into the draft, whether it is, what you want in your guys in the locker room, the kind of effort you want to see, the kind of work ethic. Are they really football guys? Are they a Max Crosby, a bleed for this? Like I football go 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 all the time, like an Antonio Pierce. And then you got, your physical characteristics as well. And your physical prototypes, the traits in a player you see on the field that you want and habits.
I remember one time having a discussion with a very successful coach, had won Super Bowls, and he was very adamant about what he wanted. Now I'm going to make this figure up. So he wants tight ends that are 6'5" and bigger. And he told me if it's 6'4.5", I'm not picking them. I might at 6'4 3/4" because it's a quarter inch. And I said to him, but what if you miss? He said, listen, we've learned in our research we have missed, but we're okay with that because we also knew before we had the guidelines, we missed a lot more by not staying within that window. I think that's very telling, don't you?
Yeah, you have to be true to yourself and true to your gut on draft day, and we've seen that from the best drafters. They're going to stick to what they wanna do. They will not give an inch or risk anything of what they personally want to take and spend a pick on and invest in, and that's why the teams that are risky and maybe the teams that do budge a little bit more on that half inch and a tight end hypothetically, they're gonna still probably be, chances are, near the top of that list we made, and then the best teams are gonna still be at the bottom of that spectrum.
You are too young to remember this, but there's a couple of men I want to talk to you about. First is Hank Bulla. He won a Super Bowl with Johnny Unitas, and then he was the head coach of the Buffalo Bills, and he invented the draft board. He was the first team, the Bills were, to actually have a draft board. They put all of the prospects on the board. They rated them. So when the draft came, they just grabbed the next guy and took him. And then George Perlis, who was the Michigan State football coach, but he was inventor of the stud 4-3 defensive line, the steel curtain that the Steelers ran. And both men, one time, the three of us, I was very close friends with both of them. The three of us were having lunch, and by the way, we were having lunch in at Dagwoods in East Lansing. But we're having lunch, and we're talking about that. And Hank Bullis said to me, "It's easy to fall in love with guys, but when you've got your plan where, okay, this is what I want, and you don't deviate from it, you avoid a lot of risk." George Perlis said that he learned from Chuck Noll, when it comes to defensive linemen, I will only take guys like this. And look how good Chuck Noll was to vote, drafting on the defensive line in the steel curtain. I think sometimes, Michael, people miss that the good drafting teams are they're risk averse. Number one, they do more research than anybody else. But number two is that they're not just risk averse. They're not afraid of missing. Hey, if this guy fits all the tangibles, I'll take him. And if this guy doesn't, I won't. And yep, 1 out of 10 that didn't may go do something well for everyone else, but 9 of the 10 I pick are going to do well from me. The best drafters are the ones who eliminate risk the most. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, you hit it right on the head, especially the last time I was on, you made the, analogy to gambling and investing, and you have to stay true to yourself, and you have to invest on what is gonna be right for your team, no matter maybe who falls to you, no matter who what the outside voices maybe want, the fans want, you gotta be true to yourself and what you want the direction of that team to be.
I had a NFL executive call me this week, Michael, just to wish my family well. And he and I were talking, and he said something that I wanted to bring up with you. And I was telling him about the Raiders and just how different it started with Dave Ziegler, but how much different it is with Tom Telesco. And he made a brilliant observation. He said the Raiders in the past were like a guy that, wants to retire a millionaire. So he takes 25 grand to Vegas and gambles. He goes, 999 out of 1,000 of those guys are not going to even keep their 25 grand. Because, but he goes, then there's the other guys who the 99 out of 999 of 1,000 who go to an investment broker and say, "Hey, help me invest this. I want to die a millionaire. Or when I retire, I want to be a millionaire." He said, in the past, the Raiders were the gamblers. And he says, now I expect them to move up the ladder and become like the better teams and now be investors. Is that not a brilliant analogy?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty well documented how much, Al Davis would sometimes, the late Al Davis would sometimes run with certain qualities, saw guys and drafting a little too high. Like one that comes to mind was Darius Hayward Bay, was a guy he drafted far too high, seventh overall as a wide receiver. And yeah, I think the best teams do become that, and maybe it takes a change of leadership, some of that stability, that coaching, the pillars you've been talking about on riding with Hondo and Dexter. But yeah, I think things are looking good for the Raiders with Telesco and Pierce's plan they got in place.
It's really different to me. I'm fascinated at the Raiders' approach. I think they're doing it the absolute right way. And, it's funny. I've had some of my critics say, well, Hondo's against drafting a quarterback. I'm not against it at all. But Tom Telesco has to have it in his thought process. This is my franchise guy. Because if he picks him and he's wrong, there's a good chance he doesn't get a chance at another GM job, and it could cost him his own. Those are huge risks, aren't they?
Yeah, we've really harped on it the last few weeks with our, what we've been writing, the podcasts. You better be sure about that quarterback, or that could really wobble your franchise. And yeah, the stakes are high for these GMs, especially one as young as Telesco, and he's obviously had this is his second opportunity from the Chargers, and yeah, he can't miss with this first round, especially
Right.
just in the draft in general.
Let's stay on this theme, but the personal respect that I hold for Bill Belichick. Um, Tremendous man. Um, I know a lot of people have different opinions of Bill Belichick. I think if you knew him personally, you'd have a different opinion of him. But um, and our good friend Rick Goslin, my mentor, and the man that many people think is the greatest NFL writer of all time, wrote a tremendous piece at rickgoslin.com about the brilliance of Bill Belichick in the later rounds. Break down what makes a good drafter in the later rounds, because that's where the Raiders have got to get to. Mike Mayock, very good drafter in the later rounds. Talk about what made Bill Belichick great, would you?
Yeah, we're talking about a guy who he had his prototypes, he had his intangibles, he knew what they could offer, and he knew the value of those picks. These picks are picks at the end of the day, and especially this because and Goslin mentions this in the article that sometimes the third, fourth, second round are lost on people how important they are because of the way television's set up. They only, the day one of the draft is like the covered day because that was for the longest time like the most interesting day. But then but behind the scenes, all along, you have a guy like Bill Belichick who knows the value of those picks, and those are just as worthy in second, third, heck, even fourth round picks. You mean you got to be drafting for the ideal that you can plug and play these guys and start them. I mean, look at the Lions with their last few drafts. Second, third, fourth round picks have been hitting.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you can look at several teams with that who've hit, and now you see the Lions on the uptick, and that's for teams to make that uptick that you've got to hit in those later rounds. All right, I want to talk to you about another subject that I think is fascinating. But in your research that you did, we talked about the 11 teams that had zero or only one top 10 pick in the last 10 years, and how those were the primo teams in the National Football League. As this develops, let's talk about smoke screens. You'll see different false flags go up here, or different false flags go up here. To me, I think that's what makes trade season so fun. But man, what makes it hard as a journalist is hundreds of emails will pour in, hearing this, and you look and see who it is. You really have to train your ears to hear from the right voices, don't you?
Yeah, I think you mentioned it a podcast a while back, and you hit it right on the head. Some teams might go to a pro day, some teams might not go to a pro day. Some teams are going to be looking at a certain guy in the combine, and because they know the media's watching, everyone's going to be looking, and maybe you float something out there or leak something out there, and yeah.
It's an interesting time. All right, let's go back to the draft because here come the Raiders now. It's going to be, to me, this has a feel of a draft that can propel them, a draft that can really push them. They were 8-9 last year. I predicted 9-8. I was off by one. But this seems like a draft. This is an ascending team. Michael, you've spent a lot of time researching the Raiders, a lot of time looking at the Raiders, a lot of time dissecting the Raiders. It's what you do. You're very good at it. If you're Tom Telesco, is there a guy that you sell the farm and move up? And you got to remember that if you do, somebody's got to be willing to trade. And now it began to come out this week what we've been telling everybody for a couple months. Washington, Bears, Patriots, nobody really wants to move. They're going to stay there. If you're Tom Telesco, are you trying to move up? Are you maybe moving up to a lower number, maybe 4 through whatever? Are you trading back? What is Michael France doing if he's in Tom Telesco's chair?
All right, and this is influenced by the great analyst and former player Brian Baldinger, but I like the idea of just let's just build a team and a foundation and continue on that path. We don't really have to take, in my opinion, we got two starting quarterbacks on the roster. Let them duke it out. I know a lot of people have trust in Aiden O'Connell. I know you do. I know a lot of smart NFL people do. Uh, Yesterday you had a great podcast talking about Aiden O'Connell. I personally, Michael France, if Michael France is GM, I think,
Wait a minute.
believe it
Wait,
or
let's just stop you there because you're new. Everybody knows it's your opinion and everybody knows it's Michael France because I'm the one that asked you. So stop the hyperbole. Let's cut through the verbal salad. Come on, Tom Telesco. You're on the clock. Who you picking?
who am I picking? Well, if it's at 13, if he's there, I like Talise Fuaga from Oregon State because he's gonna be a guy you can plug in right there to fix that upgrade, bolster the right side of the offensive line. I also really like Byron Murphy from Texas if he's there. If
Love him.
not, if not, believe it or not, I believe in trading back, getting more picks in the second, possibly third rounds, and just building that draft capital and get more players that get more potential starters.
So I'm going to get more into what I think next Thursday morning before the draft starts. And then, of course, we'll have a podcast each night after the draft from Raider headquarters, breaking everything down. But I'm going to tell you, if I was looking at what they would want, I think there would be a quarterback that magically dropped. I don't think they want to move up. I don't think that's going to happen. You pick Talise Fuaga, you go plant him on the right side and say, you play right tackle and start till Colton Miller retires. And then we may just leave you there and go get a left tackle later. But to me, Fuaga, he's a dude now. That guy is a dog. You'll appreciate this. So he gets to Oregon State, and he was not a star in the classroom. Wasn't dumb at all, but just didn't really care. Gets to Oregon State, bam, all A's. He turned up his intensity to another level, and football became serious to him. And then what was really cool is watching him grow up. Everything became serious to him. School became serious to him. All of it. He is a brutal man. He plays like an old school Raider. If you can get Talise Fuaga, you hit a home run. If you can get a Byron Murphy, can you imagine him with Christian Wilkins and Malcolm Kuntz and Tyree Will? I mean, that guy. Again, I don't. I think that would be a luxury pick because they've got a lot of weapons there. I think I would put Byron below Terrion Arnold from Alabama, but I think there are going to be so many guys there. But ideally, you got a lot of teams reaching on quarterbacks. It's pushing some good players down. I think the Raiders trade back to 17 to 25 and pick up an additional second round pick is what they would love to happen in a perfect scenario. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. I've been seeing mock drafts where certain guys that I feel would be maybe first round picks, late first round picks are falling into the late second round, especially if you're looking at a corner. I mean, this is a good cornerback draft. I really like Kamari Lassiter from Georgia. I think he could be he could fall out of the second round. We're talking about a very physical corner. He's got great instincts.
Melton, the kid from Rutgers.
Yes. And then obviously that whole team is a bunch of studs, but Mikey Sanistro from Michigan. He could be a really good corner in this league.
Really good. I'm telling you. So you're going to appreciate this. Um, I'm on the airplane the other day, and I am because I travel so much. I have all the internet and all that stuff, so I'm able to. And so I am messaging back and forth with a guy, and he told me that this may be one of the deepest drafts. He goes, and this is the caveat. It's not deepest because it's the most talented draft. He said, although it's very talented draft, he doesn't think it's the most talented, but he does think it's very talented. But he said there's just enough appealing quarterbacks that some teams are going to really reach. And he thinks there's going to be first round talent available. He goes, I could see first round talent available into the early 50s. Michael, that tells you a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm looking at my notes right here. Another guy I like, and I feel like in other years he could be a early second round, late first round pick is Muhammad Kamara, the edge rusher from Colorado State. PFF had him graded as the number 1 edge rusher in red zone downs and late down snaps, pass grade wise. I'm talking about dude who's violent off the line, got a great first step. Guys like and I feel like he could fit an Antonio Pierce. I know that's more of a luxury pick because we are pretty stocked there, but I love
Wait,
him.
wait,
And
wait,
then
wait.
Makai Wingo.
You're part of the Raiders?
The Raiders are stocked there. My bad. Sports Illustrated. Makai Wingo, defensive tackle for LSU. I mean, he's a very compact offensive tackle, but he's incredibly athletic, has a wicked first step, could eat up double teams too. That's another guy who the Raiders are stocked up in the front seven, but these guys are guys you can rotate in and just be deep at.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. I said earlier, as soon as the offseason started, I don't predict it, but I wouldn't be shocked if the Raiders kept 9 or 10 defensive linemen. Now, I still think I'm not saying that's probable, but I think there's a good shot, 10, maybe 11. I mean, excuse me, I said I think there's a good shot 10 or 11. Um, again, I still think that's a very high number, but that would not surprise me the way Antonio Pierce is committed to that defensive line and putting pressure. He saw what it did with the G-men. He saw it, and it's very fascinating. Okay, last thing I want to get to with you is Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. They've got a lot of respect. They're building a friendship. To me, when you got guys who will compete fiercely, but the moment you're off the field, it's not personal. I mean, Aiden's helping Gardner, Gardner's helping Aiden. When you've got hey, we want to compete and kick your butt, but we're also teammates. To me, this is ideal for the Raiders. This is a great situation. It speaks to the culture of the locker room, the leadership of Antonio Pierce, and the integrity of both young men. Your thoughts on that?
I agree. You talked about the effort we're seeing from everyone, and this is a team that an environment where it's iron sharpens iron. Let's put pads on pads. Let's go out and get it. We're not just going to jog from point A to point B. We're going to sprint. We're going to try to beat a guy. But at the same time, it's about the team, the silver and black with the Raiders. And that's just a healthy culture for Antonio Pearson. It's all about getting better. I mean, that incredible speech he just gave to kick things off, he's bringing in all these ex-head coaches. He wants AP, the head coach, is openly admitting, I want to surround myself with guys who make me a better head coach. We got to get better everywhere across the board. And you do if you're going to compete in the NFL, let alone our division, which is just it's going to be a dogfight.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. I don't know, and I've been around a long time. I don't remember a time when I was more excited to watch a complete draft. Now, purely on a side note, Pat McAfee, uh, I really like Pat. I like him personally as a man. I think he's great on television with his show. He's different. I like different. I don't like cookie cutter. And when he announced last week on a show, I don't remember what day it is. This whole week kind of runs together for me, but I think it was Wednesday that Bill Belichick is joining him for a pre-draft show and then an entire first round show. That is, I'm going to be in the Raiders building working, but I'm going to tape it because that is going to be mandatory watching to me for every football fan. Your thoughts?
Well, I love it because you just think about the pairing, and at least in the media, in the media's eyes, what the media believes both guys to be, right? In terms of personality, thoughts, all that. And then of course you are gonna have like a third guy sitting in with like AJ Hawk, which is just a great I love first of all, I love AJ Hawk's chemistry with Pat McAfee. I think they work make a great show together. Uh but McAfee, Pat McAfee, he's a great interviewer, and I just can't wait for some of these questions he's gonna give the great Bill Belichick and some of the insights maybe he can dig as just being not just a media personality, but he's a football guy. McAfee is a football guy, and Bill Belichick's a football guy. And I think that conversation could be really fruitful. And I think fans, journalists, everyone alike can really get some good nuggets out of it.
Now, real quick, and I think this is important. I want to really drill down on this with you. But I am looking forward to Pat asking a typical Pat question, something irrelevant or irreverent, probably is a better word, and Bill going, no, and just going in a completely different direction because that won't hurt Pat's ego. That is going to be, again, I'm going to be working, so I don't really get to watch. But I got to tell you, if I am somebody who's not working and just watching this draft, I don't even turn on ESPN or NFL. I mean, I don't even turn on the ESPN main cast. I don't turn on NFL Network. If I do, there's no sound. I've got my computer up and I'm watching Pat McAfee and Bill Belichick on YouTube.
I agree. I'll have to catch that eventually too, because I'll be, keeping my eye on the draft and pretty much everything the draft that day and the next few days after that. But it's gonna be really good viewing.
All right. He is the great Michael France. We sure appreciate him. Michael, I want you to tell everybody what is your Twitter following? You're one of our new writers covering the Raiders with us. I know you also do some college recruiting for SI, but you're one of our new Raider writers and you're doing a tremendous job. It's been a great month. So tell Raider Nation, as you start to earn their trust, you're still the newbie, but as you start to earn their trust, where do they find you on X, formerly known as Twitter?
All right. On X, my handle is at Michael Michael France, like the country, SI. Michael France SI on
All right,
X.
check them out, everybody. We appreciate you. Stay on the line. I want to talk to you real quick, Michael. Remember, everybody, you can follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter, when you go to @Hondo Carpenter, on IG at Hondo SR, and catch all of our stories every single day. We do 10 minimum, 10 stories a day of content covering your beloved Raiders. Nobody does more when you go to si.com/NFL/Raiders. See you tomorrow, everybody.